everybody, and welcome back to Writing the Rapids, the show where I, Joe Bielecki, talk to writers about writing, and very often those writers have been recommended to me by writers who have previously been on the show. In the case of this month's guest, Persephone Erin Hudson, she was recommended to me by Frog. So if you liked that interview, you'll like this one, and if you like this one, go back and listen to that one. Persephone Erin Hudson is a horror/weird fiction writer, performer, and deer in headlights with an impact kink. She's the author of Two Dead Horses Beating Each Other Off Forever, Bird Brains Puts the Dog to Sleep and Other Memories, and Dearly Beloved, all of which can be found for free on Gumroad and on itch.io in the near future. It is currently working on the grind horror folktale Do Not Fuck with the Old Bitch Who Nurses the Rabbit, completing Hard Times at the Prostate Crater, and finding hope as the dying empire of Atlantis sinks into the sea and tries to take us with it. This conversation was recorded live on February 25 as part of the first annual Writing the Rapids birthday stream. Ava Hofmann was my special co-host. Ava Hofmann is a poet and writer currently living and working in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. A visual poet, her experimental and multimodal work concerns itself with trans queer history, Marxism, and the frustrated desire inherent to encounters with the literary archive. If you want to help us get to the next year so we can have a second annual Writing the Rapids birthday stream, you can support the show in 3 ways. You can support monthly on Patreon, patreon.com/noisemakerjoe. There's a couple of tiers, so they all have their own unique rewards, and I really appreciate all of those people. You can throw a couple bucks my way for a one-time donation at paypal.me/noisemakerjoe, or you can buy my book. It's called Tired, and it's available on Amazon. Without further ado, let's get into my conversation with Persephone. I think where I want to begin, I feel like we should begin with the Dearly Beloved series.
Ah, shit.
So if you would like to give an overview about what that is, I think that's a good place to start.
Oh, well, it's a good time to light my cigarette, finally. So Dearly Beloved started... No, actually, let's pivot the other direction. Dearly Beloved is a story without any, named characters. They're all group cults, for the most part, interacting in this kind of vaguely medieval, purgatorial town. And every chapter in each book kind of focuses on a different cult and what's happening with that cult until it all kind of starts to converge in arc 3, but arc 4, which who the hell knows when that's going to come out at this point, because that's just a whole task. There's supposed to be 7. Yeah, the first 3 are the build up to the Holy War that is kind of coming. It's like all of these mostly right-wing cults, but right-wing in very different kind of ways, all kind of individually doing their things until those destructive consequences start echoing out into every other cult's destructive consequences. Yeah, we start with the Dearly Beloved themselves, who are basically a weird masculinist cult. They're basically Fight Club, but they all suck at it. And they feel really guilty that they can't feed their families while everyone is starving in this town, so they just decided to abandon their children and their wives to go do homoerotic no homo things out in the woods and suck blood out of each other's orifices. And yeah, so there's them, there's the church and the city council, who are running effectively a prison / cannibalism farm while everyone else starves. They have kidnapped a bunch of people off the street through the open secret police, and are instituting really horrific, I won't get into it, rape programs to breed people like farm animals so they can continue to eat and enjoy their opulence while everyone else suffers and dies. The arsonists are kind of effectively doomer accelerationists, more or less. they just feel this sense of cold all the time that they can't like it just they feel like beneath their skin. And yeah, they have this like great terror that like the great freeze over will happen one day. So the only way they can like feel any semblance of warmth or hope anymore is to burn things to the ground and commit arson. um yeah, so it's like a bunch of groups like that kind of as well as a furry who pisses and shits everywhere, and is like basically full dog brain 24/7. um so yeah, that's Dearly Beloved. The first three arcs. Yeah, anyway, please stop me at some point. I don't like.
Okay, so a lot of that is tying together with stuff that is in the other one of the other pieces of yours, the Bird Brains anthology. So is it sort of it's all the expanded universe sort of stuff?
uh Kind of. Like there's a couple expanded universes within my work. Bird Brains connects to is kind of isolated, but the like
Mm.
Traveler monologues connects to a play that's never going to see the light of day again, um, called "Goddamn These Minotaurs." And there was a whole expanded universe with "Goddamn These Minotaurs" and "Coyote Moons," and the Traveler monologues were all interrelated.
Mm.
Um, but so there's that universe, and then Two Dead Horses is largely its own thing, although it kind of is similar. There's some similar stuff going on to A Prostate Crater later. um and Dearly Beloved is mostly self-isolated, but there I almost tied it into the Traveler monologues and some of the Goddamn These Minotaurs stuff with a character called the Crooked Dog,
Okay.
who's basically like the Black Dog of Death, but like its legs are fucked up and broken and just like mangled. Its bones are jutting out, and it's basically like it just causes harm however it can. Like it's a deific figure that just likes. It's kind of a trickster god that just likes to hurt people with no. It doesn't have like an ideological bent on who it hurts. It just likes to hurt anyone and everyone. Like it kills cops just as often as it causes an entire diner full of people to burn to death. Um, but that kind of got. But A Prostate Crater does have the Crooked Dog in it, so I don't know.
Okay. Um, the Fire Watcher monologue specifically kind of
Ah,
felt similar to me. Although something I noticed in your writing is that each individual piece like starts out sort of normal-ish most of the
mm-hmm.
time and then like ratchets up into like the speculative genre sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's the one piece in arc 2 where it's just like here is gay smut, and then suddenly we're talking about like, did you eat your child when he starved to death? Did you eat your child? It was the starving times. And you're like, wait a minute, hold on. I feel like there were a decent amount of pieces that I read that sort of had those like crazy right hand turns that I don't know. It was just like I was reading one thing and then suddenly it's like, oh wait a minute, this is some weird cult thing happening.
Oh yeah, that turn, especially the one you mentioned, was very intentional. That very like, there it was gay smut, and then very suddenly they're arguing about eating children. Uh, yeah, that's been a big thing in a lot of my work, even as it's like changed over the years. Because like the stuff from the first book, Bird Brains, that was all like written way before anything else. Like Dearly Beloved was like 2019, and Bird Brains, almost every piece in there was from like 2017.
Hmm.
And so my work did a lot of change under that time. It kind of like, but that kind of turn, that kind of hard turn each time is still very much kind of there.
Hmm. Ava, feel free to jump in at any time. I haven't thought about how I was going to try to like loop you in, so
Yeah, well, maybe sort of related to all this, I'm really interested in sort of um, your thought process about sort of having these sort of like ritualized like violences and like systematized violences and like you said, these cults essentially, right? Um, it, in various ways, it like this sort of really like challenging violence, I think appears a lot in your work. I'm very interested in sort of your thinking about that and sort of
Oh yeah.
like how you started sort of thinking about writing things like that and your thought process with writing things like that, and just because it's it's an interesting question of when someone is writing about this kind of things, like the approach and like why like um, what it means for their art practice, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I think the ritualistic stuff really started, it just kind of evolved as like a response to seeing like the vast systems of violence on like a systemic and like cultic scale that is just going on constantly all the time, and I don't know what else to do but kind of try to reflect that, because it just eats at your brain to just like know just how much the world is built on the weight of that like systemic and cultic violence, and how we justify like of how we need to craft these narratives to ourselves to justify not only the things we do but like to avoid the actual, like Dearly Beloved especially was tuned to this idea that like it started with like flat earthers, like it started initially that of like everybody can see that there's problems with capitalism, but they, a lot of people don't want to cite capitalism as the problem, and so they'll come up with like the most wild ass shit to address to blame something. Like it goes anywhere from like the earth is flat to the Jews TM, like of who gets blamed so that individuals and people in power don't have to look at global capitalism and colonialism as like the reason for this, because like everybody knows it fucking sucks. Like everybody can at least understand to some degree that things are fucked and they cannot go on this way. But I wanted to kind of like try to explore why the elaborate excuses and rituals that we craft to not actually address the problem, and how that just exacerbates everything else. Um, and then as to like cultic violence itself, I think that the two biggest pinpoints for that are what I playing Bloodborne in 2018 for the first time, and just getting like I was at a point where I was like violently agoraphobic, and just like we don't need to get into that, but like I was spending a lot of time inside, and I was just like very very invested in the Bloodborne lore, and just how like systematized this violence was, and how like uh, the church would get the people to join in on these like witch hunts, so that the people felt like they were doing something and not slowly dying and suffering horribly at the hands of the church. It was a way to deflect blame away from the church and get people to participate in that kind of systematic violence. Um, and then also Porpentine's Psycho-Nymph Exile, which I read in during the pandemic, some point during these last like 3 fucking years. Um, and the scene that I always like come back to, it's like it's not even a huge scene in that book, but it's the scene where like there's a bunch of women being fucked in the ass, and in they're like strapped into guillotines while they're experiencing anal sex, and this is like a television program, and so like right as these women come, the guillotines drop, cut off their heads, and like there's this note that Porpentine leaves in there about how their like assholes are still like flexing even after death, and that scene lives rent free in my brain every day of my miserable life. um but yeah, it's that kind of the spectacle of violence, the kind of lurid nature of it, the lurid and performative nature of it all, that I like most want to try to pinpoint, because that, I don't know, it's not just that these things happen quietly, these violent, because I mean plenty of violences do happen quietly to some degree or another, especially like more interpersonal ones, like, you know, the nuclear family is an incestuous cult with a chapter in every home. But like, yeah, these violences are meant to send a message to people. They're meant to communicate something, and that's, I think, something I'm trying to pinpoint.
Yeah, totally. Joe, do you have any?
Um,
Or do you want to throw it back to me?
I mean, there's a lot there that I also just want to say yes to. I am reminded of your tweet from a couple days ago where you were talking about how, hey, this dude on Letterboxd didn't like Dogtooth. I wonder if he's a fascist. And it's like, yep.
I think the best thing about that whole thing was the tweet, like 2 or 3 down on that one Chud's timeline, that was like, any man who can survive a medical incident without going to a doctor is like better than women, or like is usurping womanhood, or I don't know. It was some like galaxy brain shit.
Yeah.
There was a couple of those guys. I didn't expect that review to take off. I usually get like 10 likes on something for my usual menagerie of people who like my shit for whatever reason, and I kind of expected it to just be that, but it started taking off, and I was like, oh good lord, I'm gonna get chuds. I said mean things about the nuclear family. This is gonna piss a lot of people off. And thankfully I only got a few chuds, only one of whom tried to like implicate me in vague sex crimes. But yeah, I was really worried that was going to be like a big thing, because the more present you are on the internet as a trans woman, and the more hostile, I guess, you are to, or like you start talking shit about their favorite institutions, and these guys get angrier than fuck all. So like, yeah, I was really worried the chuds were gonna come after me for that one, and thankfully they didn't.
That's funny. I wonder if you could search in his tweets for like male disposability, right? And like see how often he talks about that. Right? Like that, because I got a feeling like right now, how many of these guys, these like warrior god worshipping dudes, are just like, but they can't leave with their daughters. It's like, well, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like you can't do one thing and then expect the other thing to happen. It is interesting to me. This is much like your writing going to take a crazy turn. It's interesting to me that there is a community on Letterboxd. I use it almost entirely just to catalog the anime I watch, because I find it hard to keep in my brain what weird anime I've watched. And similarly, I'm not used to the Gumroad platform at all. Frog mentioned it when I talked to her, because she's got a lot of her stuff on itch.io, which I didn't know hosted text, for one thing. So I'm interested in your choice to use the Gumroad platform as a home for most of your work.
Oh, that's a fun one, because I'm going to be moving most of my shit to itch real soon. I just need to like do it, just because of like Gumroad's bullshit. I mean, everything Frog said in her episode is 100% correct about Gumroad, and then the shit that happened with Aggie, like her comics getting taken off of Gumroad, and then Gumroad's weird reaction to announcing they're doing NFTs, and then being super weird at people when there was blowback. So I'm going to be taking my shit off of Gumroad and moving it over to itch sometime in the near future. But for a while I chose Gumroad, because when I first put out Bird Brains, I like had physical copies that I did through like the Amazon program for a minute, and then like a couple months later I felt really weird about having my book through Amazon, so I just pulled it and moved it to Gumroad. And for a while, like Gumroad really worked fine. Like it wasn't a great platform, but it did what I needed it to do, which was like host my work and allow me to make books free for people if they wanted it. Like they could pay if they wanted to, but like I agree with Frog, what Frog said in her episode, that like people should just be able to have access to these things, and there's no reason why I should have to be some Scrooge McDuck motherfucker about it. Like the $5 is not going to make or break me, especially because like I don't get enough readers to make or break anything. So I liked having the freedom it afforded me to have it accessible to people. But yeah, I got to move my shit over to itch, because like Gumroad is just continually acting up constantly and being super hostile to the people that use it most. And also like if you ever look at the emails Gumroad like sends out, like they have that Unbound problem where they're like the people that they're hyping the most are like weirdo self-help gurus. Like they're like, oh, check out this guy who sold 25,000 copies of this is not an incel book, but it's not an incel book.
The mask stays on during sex. How to get women while actually hating them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
We call that ass wide shut. But yeah, like it's all stuff that like it's before you get into 12 Rules for Life. It's not quite anything necessarily fucked up, but then like it's the self-help slippery slope. Like you start on. Oh, hello. My fiance just got home. Oh no, you're good, babe. Mwah. Yeah, so Gumroad is just not great, and I'm trying to move all my shit, so that's the answer.
Okay. Cool. So I imagined that would be close to the answer. I suppose I'm always interested in this self-help sort of question, right? The self-publishing question, not self-help. Not all I'm doing is I can't
Same thing.
I only see the face of Gary V in my vision right now. It's like when you take way too much psychedelics and you just can't see past the visuals. It's just his face. The self-publishing question of like for me, it's I haven't really done it because aside from like posting on neutral spaces here or there, or like posting stuff for free on my Patreon, of like I'm stuck in this mode of like, how do I know something's done if nobody has said that it's okay to publish, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So I don't know, like what is your relationship with your work such that you are able to put it out and be, you know, to know when it's done, sort of thing?
That's a good question. A lot of the time I just like, okay, so this answer is going to start is partially a process thing, is that like I have this very inefficient system where I kind of edit as I go compulsively. Like I can't just like write a rough draft like a normal person. I have to just be constantly editing line by line as I'm going, and so it takes me fucking forever to get anything, but it does at least help cut down on editing time later. However, I probably like I usually end up like throwing it up like after it's all done, and I'll usually do like another editing pass just to make sure I didn't like leave some ridiculous typo in there. Although I think all of my books have at least one typo. And Bird Brains, I like fucked up how to conjugate Z pronouns, and I just hope no one will notice. Like it's bad. But yeah, I usually just end up kind of throwing it up once once it's all kind of compiled and I'm feeling relatively satisfied with the arc I left, but I definitely do not have like an editor, and I'm just kind of rolling with my gut feeling. So there's always a bit of a question whenever I put stuff up, like, am I actually done with this? Like, have I actually put this together? And then I usually just ignore it because I'm tired and I like attention and I want it. I want this thing that I've been working on forever to just finally be up and available. Even if no one reads it, like it's nice just to have it like up. Although that's been a little different with a couple projects like Bird Brain, specifically the play, the short play, and Two Dead Horses beating each other off forever. Like those came very, very fast. Those came in the process of like a couple weeks. And Bird Brains took like 2 days. It was 2 or 3 days. It was very fast. And so those ones I always feel really confident because they're like much shorter. They're very contained. They're very like, they have like a very, very specific emotional arc and a very, very specific thing to say. They get in, they get out, as opposed to my other work, which tends to like meander a lot and just kind of go down rabbit holes. Yeah, so those are, I feel a lot more confident when I throw them up on Gumroad. I'm like, okay, that one I'm pretty sure is like cemented. But the rest of them, I have no fucking clue. I'm just freewheeling it.
Okay. You were recommended to me by Frog because I very much enjoyed the sort of chamber play thing that she did. So she pointed me to your work because of that. And I'm very much like unfamiliar with the sort of literary play as form, and I like it a whole lot. So I'm interested in knowing how you got into that form and what the sort of process is there.
Oh yeah, that easy question. Yeah, I did theater for a really long time, all through high school, up through college, and I got a degree in it. And so I kind of worked on a lot of sides, but yeah, theater was going to be like theater and comics were the two things that I was initially planning to do. Like prose was not the plan when I first started putting stuff out. And that's taken a couple different avenues. The Traveler monologue started as a specific thing where I was like reading a lot of Susan Laurie Park's work, who is a Black feminist playwright who is very, very focused on like oral history and like oral storytelling. And I was reading a lot of her work and some chamber plays, and so I got really, really into like how can I play with this like oral storytelling function. And yeah, for a while I was really into Susan Laurie Parks and Naomi Wallace, who's also really great. Read playwrights who were arrested by the CIA. But yeah, so theater was my original basis, and that's where I was going to start. Bird Brains, Goddamn These Minotaurs, Coyote Moons. That was like the main form I was writing in for years. And then I ended up dropping Coyote Moons because it was just like a massive project that kept undergoing changes and was like the problem with my full length plays is they were like borderline chamber plays. Like they were like I intended them to be performed, but they also had just so much shit going on that was just going to be like I always had solutions to implement them, but it was always going to be like a major thing to do it. And so I also wanted to make sure it could read as like a chamber piece as well. But those just kind of eventually like collapsed under their own weight. And then I started writing Dearly Beloved, and I got very into like prose and poetry exclusively for a while. But then with Dearly Beloved Arc 3, I started playing around with theater again, as well as Solipsia Polyp, which I don't have up on Gumroad, but I probably should, which was going to be like a series of short plays about the CIA's reboot of MK Ultra. And then obviously Two Dead Horses as well, when that came about. And so I kind of had moved away from theater for a while, like partially because like I was just writing things that were just like too much for the form. And then also I had a very complicated relationship to theater in college. I was the only trans woman in the department. There was just a lot of constant bullshit. I had to like, yeah, it became very disheartening. My thesis like eventually went off pretty well, but it was like very, very troubled. Like two of my actors had to drop out right before, like a week before we went on, because one of them who had had a concussion and was recovering from it, one of my classmates in the thesis class in a different class had decided to headbutt somebody who was recovering from a fucking concussion. So they got reconcussed and had to drop out. And then my other actor had to drop out. And this was a 3-person show.
Oh no, that's terrible.
Yeah, so the second person had to drop out because they were only comfortable doing some of the like sex scenes with the person who had to drop out because of the concussions. So the point of all this being, yeah, theater became like I had a lot of difficult emotions attached to it, a lot of difficult situations happening. So I kind of left it alone for a while and just kind of like dug really hard into prose and prosody. But now I'm starting to kind of circle back to it. And I'm really enjoying that. And even when I'm still doing like prose work, like Do Not Fuck with the Old Bitch Who Nurses the Rabbit, I'm still keeping a very like theatrical bent to some of it. So that's how I started with that.
Because to me, I mean, being in high school, musicals doesn't make one a theater kid. You know, I was never invited to the Journey sing-alongs in Denny's or whatever it was that they did, but
oh good lord, oh god.
Like so, like purely as a reader, right? Like, there's something utilitarian about the form of writing in a play, where you can just you don't have to transition between dialogue and action. That feels really nice. Like
no, that was a huge thing with theaters. I'm going to be honest, I still don't know how to write prose. I have put out a number of novellas at this point. I still don't know how to fucking do it. Like prose's structures are very like strange to me. Like I could write, but like the structural rigidity of traditional prose is, even as like an avid reader, is like something that's like never quite gelled with my brain, and I always found kind of difficult. And so I really liked that the free flowing nature of it. It allowed me to just not get mired in the like the structure of the paragraph and the structure of like traditionalist prose itself. The freedom it afforded is still very attractive to me. Yeah.
Yeah, and can I jump in?
Please.
Yeah, and sort of like maybe sort of related to this, I'm really sort of fascinated in your work how like thinking of like the latest act of Dearly Beloved, right? How you know, it just sort of moves in and out, like in order to sort of tell its story, it's moving in and out of so many sort of different genres of writing, right? Like there's like there's stuff that feels more like prose, there's poetry, and then there's now an it's been called these acts, and then there's an actual bit of playwriting in it, right? And like even some of there's like then some sections that I'm not even really sure what genre to call them, right? Like I just realized that the title of it is just 3 numbers in Roman numerals.
Oh yeah.
Like 3.7 in parenthesis 12, right? Which is this like almost just this like monologue, right?
Oh, is that Abuser House?
I think so.
Yeah, the house that keeps killing people.
Yeah.
I hate it when that
Don't you
happens.
dare make a home out. Yeah, it is. I think yes, it is. And how
Yeah.
that section is like, it's not. It doesn't even feel like, it, it is like existing between genres for me a little bit, right? Because it's like, it's kind of poem like, but it's also kind of like a monologue. Yeah. So I'm really interested in sort of, especially having moved from playwriting, and it seems like you're really moving in and out of genres all the time, and sort of it's just even just sort of to create this sort of world, right? I'm really interested in that process for you.
Oh, absolutely. There's a couple reasons. One is that I just like to fuck around and find out. I just like to play a lot. And the one of the other things is with Dearly Beloved specifically, I started with arc 3, but that was really going to start to take off in arc 4. Was this idea that like the traditional structure itself is breaking down. Like arc 1 and 2 are like pretty just straight up prose, and then arc 3 I was introducing some of there's like playwriting elements. There's like that weird abuser house thing where it's like poetry and a monologue and all these other things at the same time. And then arc 4 was going to go fuck wild with it. Like no one individual chapter was going to be the same thing, to try to like mirror this, like even the page itself, like really actually honestly inspired by a lot of your work, is like the page is just like deteriorating, or the idea of the structure is deteriorating as the world itself begins to deteriorate under the strain of like all these cults doing their shit, and instigating their doomsday plans. And like even the shape of the page was going to break down. And then Dearly Beloved arc 5, which who knows when that's going to come out, was going to be the only arc in was going to be the only was going to be in purely visual poetry and like imagery. It was going to be the only chapter or the only arc in the series that had pictures that showed anything visually, in the realm of in the realm of the rotting carcasses and flamingos that rest beneath the skin of the world. And then arc 6 was going to be like a bunch of short stories as an arc. So I was just gonna I really wanted to continue fucking around with like even the form of the story itself is undergoing mutation and metamorphosis in line with how the world itself is doing that. Like and then also I just think that like different, like that hybrid work is very effective, because different chapters or different moments sometimes need different like vehicles to communicate what it wants to communicate. And sometimes I think like I don't think the abuser house chapter could have worked as traditional as prose. I don't think it would have worked as like it maybe could have worked as poetry, but like it wouldn't have been able to capture that like time thing that is going on there, where like memories and time is like bleeding into each other in such a way that like to reflect the fact that this house is just constantly in a state of like, this one person hurt me and now I can't let that go ever, and I'm just constantly re-experiencing that trauma as I exhibit that trauma on other people. So I think hybrid work is just very effective at being able to take individual moments and give them the form that they need to communicate what they need to communicate.
Yeah, totally.
I like that. I like the idea of, I don't know, almost deparametering the writing, right? Listening to what the piece wants to be. I don't know if I don't think I've made it a secret that I'm kind of a fan of setting strict parameters for yourself when writing, at least for myself. I like to say this is going to be a book that is only descriptions of paintings, but the paintings don't exist, or whatever.
Oh, hell yeah.
And so like, okay, well, how do
Yeah.
how do I do that?
Are you gonna do that?
I have several small
I
pieces
want to
like
read that
that.
book.
I've,
So bad.
when I started
Please finish that.
when I started
Yeah,
streaming back in
please.
the day, this was what the stream was going to be for, was for that. So that's why I was thinking of
Oh,
it.
hell
But
yeah.
and then you have the challenges that arise from that, like, well, if I want that to be novel length, right? If I want that to be 80,000 words, I'm going to need to do like 80 paintings. I'm going to need to imagine 80 different paintings that are distinct enough to warrant 1,000-word description or whatever. And so there's like the fun brain stretching of that, where I also enjoy the sort of mystical experience of letting the piece create itself out through you. And that's, I think, just as challenging, if not more challenging, than, telling yourself, this is going to be this thing. Now, how do I do the thing? And this is where I don't have a question, right? That's the thought.
Oh, but no, absolutely. Like all of my work, or most of it at least, has that kind of thing. Like dearly beloved, there was going to be no individual named people except for the prisoners in Arc 3, and they were all going to be like group cults, or traveler monologues like it is, or Two Dead Horses. All of the acts were 3 pages long. Or they started out as 3 pages long up until the very end of scene 3, where they break that relationship pattern where they're like, yeah, we keep fighting all the time, and what if we just didn't do that? And that was the first time that structure got broken. And then I think later the pages expanded, but they were kept within that tight range of like 3 pages, or 6, I think, in that 6 or 7 in 1 or 2 chapter cases, or scene cases. And I can't remember what there was some very Jewish reason I had for doing that. I cannot remember for the life of me what I feel wild for saying that I can't remember the specific like magical bullshit that I was trying to do with that book. But there was something specific in like Jewish numerology that I like, as a Jewish person who was grieving the death of her grandma at the time, and why I wrote that book. I was like trying to use like numerology with the pages and the structure of it and the number of acts, that 3, to like do some like hyper sigil Grant Morrison shit with it, because I mean, if the Grant Morrison influence is really apparent, like through a lot of my work. If you've read any Grant Morrison,
I'm not familiar.
They're a Scottish comic book writer who, like, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. Like, there's like a subset of like non-binary trans women who are really into comics while growing up, that are approximately like my age, who had a very intense relationship with their comics. Like Grant Morrison was a wild fucking person. Like they're like the Scottish chaos magician. They like invented this thing called a person. I can't remember what it is, but like basically they made a character in one of their stories that they believed they could physically like they basically made an OC that they could pilot around. Was their thought behind it, and like that they were going to kill off that character, and they gave that character like a flesh-eating skin virus, and then they ended up in the hospital with a flesh-eating skin virus, like in real life, and they wrote the character out of death, and then they got better. Their book was going to be canceled at one point, the Invisibles, and they were in the letter section, they were like, okay, so let's talk about hyper sigils, and you could charge those any number of ways. Like you could use pain, but pleasure is better. So please do these jerk off sigils for my book to keep it from getting canceled. And apparently something must have worked because it didn't get canceled. And and they were just doing shit like that all the time. Like a bunch of their books were specifically hyper sigils. They were meant to be like acts of magic that like shaped the world outside as well as inside. Like and some of that came through with bird brains, two dead horses, and then some of in less apparent ways, like the sea captain, in there's like a bunch of those are like kind of references to like, not direct references, but like in the style of like Grant Morrison in a lot of their works will just kind of like throw out something really wild, like, oh yeah, and then they pass the lighthouse of Asjax, and it has 30 eyes, and then there's the fish with the body of a man, and like, you know, that kind of just like just throwing wild concepts at the wall and seeing what sticks, and just kind of rolling with it. Was yeah. What was the original thing?
We were talking about parameters and writing.
Parameters and writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, parameters have been a big part. My newest work, do not fuck with the old bitch that nurses the rabbit, has a specific parameter setup where there's like it's a little looser, but it's like there are 5 great witches, and it's almost video game like in its structure of like there's 5 great witches, and the old woman has to go kill each and every one of them, while the story with, you know, the antlered woman happens kind of separately, because that's another thing that I keep doing, is like having these narratives which intentionally diverge until they kind of come back together in the climax and kind of shape the meaning, as you know, as they experience these things individually, and then when they come into contact, things get really often very fucked up. Yeah, so it's another one of those.
Cool. I was also trying to think. I'm not super well versed with you know, the Jewish religion, as much as I am like fascinated by it. So like it was interesting to me because I had to look up what Shiva was, and the idea that it's 7 days, but there was 6 acts to the play, but then like an intermission, but the intermission was like 4 of them.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. There's the 7. Yeah, I was trying to remember what was up with the 7. Yeah, because with sitting Shiva, or Shiva, you're supposed to mourn for 7 days and pin a piece of cloth to your clothes, which is why at the end of Two Dead Horses, they take the bit of horsehair and like loop it around their coat. Sorry, trying to remember where. Yeah, I'm kind of a bad Jew. I'm not particularly observant, but in the last like five plus years, I've been like trying to embrace my Jewishness more, into like really between like some of my partners are Jewish, and some of my current and ex-partners are Jewish, and some there's a lot of like Jewish trans women that I know who's like Judaism is very like central to their work, often like not explicitly, but like I think about Never Angeline North a lot, like
Right.
Seeing a lot of her work, was also big in that, and so it with Two Dead Horses, my grandma is the side of the family where I'm Jewish. My mom's side is waspy as fuck. And after my dad never really considered himself particularly Jewish, and that was kind of what I was in part. Like we did Hanukkah candles, but that was like really about it. Like we weren't a particularly Jewish family. We weren't observant in any kind of way. But my grandma was a little bit more like, she was pretty secular all in all, but like she was definitely the person who like the only reason my dad did the candles was because my grandma did the candles for Hanukkah. And so it felt very important to me to kind of embrace that, to kind of embrace that Jewishness in honor of her passing. Yeah. And
You go ahead.
The last thing I'll say about the Jewishness is this hasn't happened yet, but in Dearly Beloved Arc 4, if and when I ever actually get around to finishing that, there's going to be a group of prisoners who escape, and some of whom leave, and they have every right to. They're the only people that can get the fuck out of town, because eventually, like, the town is going to be completely isolated and cut off, and they're the only people who can pass through that membrane. Are the people who've been imprisoned and tortured and assaulted by the state. But some of them are going to choose to stay behind and form the Golem, which is basically like a mutual aid, like anarchist like street group that is like there to try to help people who are like suffering as the world kind of devours itself alive. And so yeah, instead of the Golem as like a singular figure, it's an anarchist group protecting people out in the streets as shit gets really, really bad.
I've only met 2 Jewish trans women, but that seems like a lot, like in an underrepresented group, in 2 underrepresented groups that I would encounter 2 very close to each other. I just find that fascinating, and I wish I had some sort of like understanding where I could either say or ask something that would lead to some sort of better understanding. But I don't know. I just find that unusual and delightful, and I feel like I should mention it.
I think there's something to be said about that. That it's similar to why there's a lot of like autistic trans women. Like, I'm autistic as well. Like, or just like autistic and Jewish trans people generally. Is that like, not that there isn't like a contingent of like, like really fucked up assimilationist Jews. I have to see Ben Shapiro's stupid fucking face every single day of my goddamn life. I want to bully him so bad. And not in the cool, sexy way. But or like Zionism. But like Jewishness has like a radical history, like a radical like anarchist and communist history. And the point I'm trying to get here is that like autism, it kind of like it fosters. It can foster this ability to kind of see the world differently and to question some things that are normally just kind of taken as gospel, believing in capitalism, believing in like the gender binary and like bioessentialism, and like those structures can be very liberatory and allow one to like view things very differently. And so that's why there's like a lot of autistic trans people, is like, for a lot of us, like this gender shit never really made a whole lot of sense to begin with, and so that makes it easier than to start like questioning if you really are the thing people say you are. And I think there's something similar, not exactly the same thing, but something similar going on with like Jewishness, is that like there is a real radical history there, and like a very like expansive history. Like the Jewish religion is like not there's a lot of, and similar to like any faith, there's like a lot of ways to go about it, and there's a lot of very radical kind of sects and denominations within Jewishness, everywhere from like radical progressive sects to like you can get into some really cool and interesting stuff with Kabbalah, which I'm not like super familiar with, but which tends to be like the more magical, mystical side of like Judaism. So yeah, it just gives you, it provides an opportunity for you to kind of like look at the structures of the world and be like, this doesn't make any fucking sense, just a little bit earlier. I think.
Okay. I suppose I can see that. The little bit I do know, I watched a couple, like a series of lectures on like the history of Jewish mysticism, and it seems like in these different writings there are different like gendered ways to look at God, where God becomes masculine and feminine, and then sometimes both. So I
oh yeah,
at least at like from that point, like you can see how religion doesn't necessarily have to be like a barrier to understanding yourself then, right? Because, well, if God can, be this and do this, and we're made in God's image, then it makes sense that I could understand myself in this more true way or whatever, if that makes any sense.
Oh no, it absolutely does. And the last thing I'll say about it is that like Judaism itself like really encourages you to ask questions in a way that like a lot of Christian faiths absolutely do not. Like you are asked to question God in Judaism a lot of the time. Like you are really truly asked to like question God and question yourself and like question the things you are being told. And so yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like it. I like to sit with that for a second. Ava, we are nearing an hour. I want you to be the last jump off point before we get into the reading.
Okay. Put on the spot. The last one. Oh, geez Louise.
I mean, unless it's like a 30-second answer in that point, we're gonna have to. I'm gonna have to think of something else to say.
I did have. Yeah, give me like a couple seconds because I'm trying to formulate it.
I'm paid by the hour, so don't you worry about taking any time for me. I love to say that at work because half the people don't know I'm not full time, and they're like, "Wait, what?" And that makes people uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this previous discussion is also maybe a lead into thinking about like gender and like queerness in your work. I think this is a good way to sort of end it off, right? Because like I think there's a lot of really like great queer art that's like mixing like experiences of trauma with also like the sort of the relationship of that trauma with sort of specific like fascinations or questions, right? And I'm just very interested in sort of thinking about that with sort of your work, right? Which I think is an example of some of that really great art that.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I think that's a good question to sort of.
Gender and queerness has been a very interesting thing for me because like I don't since people expect you to write a fucking gender manifesto, like they expect every goddamn thing to be like some treatise on like the true experience of transness, and that's like fake as shit. I don't believe that. Like there's not even like a singular like way to experience anything or even a singular self. Like I've had conversations with Frog about this that were really lovely. So I rarely try to write about gender. Like there's a couple pieces in the Bird Brains anthology that are much more like about gender tm, like the Minotaur and or the Minotaur cowboy and the Orphea, there we go. But I don't like to write about gender, but I do like to write about gender dynamics and like the ways that those play out. Like Two Dead Horses, I was like very interested in the ways that like this kind of like fluidity of being and the kind of way that like me and some other trans women I know like are kind of women, sort of, whatever the fuck that means. But also sometimes when we're like together, we're also kind of guys in a weird sort of like, we're not men and we're not boys, but like there's a little bit of like, I don't know, there's something going on there. And so I wanted to try to get at that kind of like fluidity and that relationship between like the yeah or like something I've tried to do is like people write about abuse and violence as like a uniquely patriarchal thing, and that drives me up the fucking wall because it's like, yeah, men are on some fucking shit all the time, especially white men, but like but I wanted to kind of get at, because like I and a lot of other people have been abused and hurt in a variety of capacities by people who aren't men, and like we see this on the global stage too, is like women be doing shit. And so something I've tried to really focus on in my work is this kind of idea, like we get nowhere when having conversations about abuse and systemic violence if we just kind of go, well, it's the men's problem, like, because that doesn't really address the like, yeah, there's definitely like a heightened prevalence of it like under patriarchy, but like it does us no fucking good to pretend that this is like a unique problem with men. And in fact, this often allows people who like are violent, whether interpersonally or systemically, to kind of hide behind, well, I'm not a man, so like what I'm doing is not the same shit. Like I mean, you can see this from, you know, individual stuff to like fucking like Hillary Clinton or you know, like anybody on the global stage. They're like, well, I'm a woman, so anything I do, it's actually girl bossing when I drone bomb a bunch of children. It's very feminist when I do it. And that is incredibly disgusting to me, like both personally and also just like, yeah, we get nowhere without like talking about the ways in which like we like even people who are marginalized by patriarchy, by whiteness, by like any number of things, like can co-opt ourselves into like the state. And we see that with like the gay guys in Dearly Beloved, who like are wannabe cops, who are mostly kind of just, you know, doing Scooby-Doo role play until like they get an actual chance to perform being a cop, which just means torturing some dude in a shed. Or like in the book I'm working on, or one of the books I'm working on, Do Not Fuck with the Old Bitch That Nurses the Rabbit, almost everybody in that book is a woman. And they're you know, like the Aylard woman is doing good things and trying to help people, but like all of the great witches are participating in what is at best serial killer shit on like on a scale, and which are either doing serial killer shit or just like outright like industrial scale human trafficking. And so is like the state. Like there's some stuff about like rape and or women committing rape in that book. There is in Abuser House, the house is a woman and kills men and women alike, and kills anyone who comes in there, because she too was abused by a woman. We don't like. And so that's the kind of thing that I want to get into, is like is not some fucking manifesto about how I'm really a woman, blah blah blah, please accept me, please don't hate me on sight. Like yeah, that's fine, and there's some use for that, but like it's not, I'm not interested in explaining to cis people a single fucking thing. Like I have to do this constantly just by existing in public. Like I don't need to be doing that shit. But what I do think is useful and interesting is exploring how these kind of like gender dynamics kind of play out, and the ways in which those dynamics can either be very liberatory or it can be very, very fucked up. And yeah, just I guess just kind of exploring like what like really going beyond the 101 step here and saying, okay, but what does this do? Like what are these various like gender relationships, and what are these various like relationships to bodies do? like, in the same way that, like, do not fuck with the old bitch who nurses the rabbit. Like, some of those people are cis women and some of them are trans. Like, and the distinction between them is kind of murky and fluid. Like, and the relationship to bodies then is fluid too. Because I'm like, I'm not interested in, like, I'm very rarely interested in, like, a very strict, basic, like gender dynamic. It just doesn't interest me. It's just like, what can we do with gender? Like, how does gender inform the ways we treat each other? Okay, yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah, that's. I think that's a great answer. Yeah, the dynamics over some kind of totalizing theory. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so the piece that I'm going to read today is Hard Times at the Apostle Ranch, which started out as its own individual short story and wasn't going to be anything more, and then ended up becoming the, like, prologue to Hard Times at the Apostate Crater, which takes place 300,000 plus years after the fact, with one of the characters that's going to be mentioned. It's basically a whole spin-off book from this one short story. So the short story is effectively just the prologue, but I'll read that. And the only thing I'll say about it is I'll just give some content warnings about it. There's some body horror and some gore. There's some uncomfortable shit in there. There's, like, a brief reference to rape that didn't happen on screen. But yeah, there's a lot of descriptions of, like, gore and violence. It's a pretty intense little, like, weird Western piece. So I thought I'd throw that out there just so, you know, people don't end up stumbling into something that's a little intense. All right. Hard Times at the Apostle Ranch. When you arrive for your first day at the Apostle Ranch, they give you a gun. You punch the clock by cocking the Glock. If you protest the gun, they tell you plainly, those ostriches ain't normal. They're right, but they don't gotta be so fucking smug about it. Or maybe they do. Those ostriches do things to a person. No one ever protests on their second day. Your shift starts at high noon. They put a bag over your head and take it off in one fluid motion. In an instant, you're balls deep in the ulcers of the desert. The rancid sunlight gores your eye like it were gouged by a bull's horn. None of us are quite sure if this is literal. It sure feels literal. You adjust. The debatably literal swiftly sours into the undeniably liturgical. This is an act of worship. It has to be. When those fucking ostriches prolapse from the meat beneath the dirt, you gotta make a holy war of it. Scorched earth Sunday fucking service, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. You adjust. You're standing in a cow pasture blistered with bogs. The cows drink from the irradiated soup with dexterous suckling tongues. Officially, publicly, you're there to protect the cows. After the first day, though, you ain't there for nothing but to annihilate those feral fucking birds. 10 ranch hands, hyena man, and you, armed and overall to the tits. By the grace of God, we go to the slaughter. Those ostriches ain't normal. You hear, but you'll never know until they berserker bum rush you out of the goddamn blue. That's how they always do. Suddenly, violently charging across the desert like coked up roadrunners, screeching in broken tongues. The Omega radiation fried their fucking brains and fucked their bodies into shape. They run on what were once human arms, elbows bent backwards, their wings a ribcage wretched open, webbed with sagging flesh. A human head rests atop a neck of fused human legs, former feet jutting out from distended jaws to form a beak lined with several dozen teeth. They've all been radiation burned the color of projectile vomit stewing in a shiny oil spill, sweating piss and bleeding pus, splattered in the filth of human bodies torn apart. Those ostriches ain't fucking normal, and that ain't even the end of it. Those ostriches, they know things they shouldn't. When they're close enough to see you specifically shooting at them, they'll tell you, at length. Divorce, the shit you beat your meat to, seeing your kid die slow of solar plague. Every shame and secret you got bared like a knife. Once an ostrich squawked the story of how a new hire had stalked and raped a girl some years past. We let the ostrich take his pecker and beat him near to death real slow-like. Left him to be torn apart by whatever found him first. Even in Holy War, there are hard fucking limits. Fuck around and we will find out. That's the one warning you get. Oh, and if any of the abominations beg for help, put them the fuck down. A few of them have recently developed a tactical mutation. They'll use the opportunity to corkscrew skullfuck your eyes out. Or, for a fleeting moment, they remember who they were, the grief and terror of it all driving them into a sadistic frenzy. Either way, they've skullfucked 5 new hires blind. I reiterate, put them the fuck down. That's the other one warning you get. Anyway, the first day of the Holy War of the rest of your life. You, 10 ranch hands, and Hyena Man. Oorah, yeehaw, and all that. You'll cock the Glock in, get whisked away to the killing pastures, and dick around with the boys until the ostriches decide to ambush you. This will usually take as long as it takes a cocksucker to suck off a cigarette. Which is to say, about 3 minutes if I'm timing my smokes right. But just as often it'll be hours. Or they'll have their beaks at your balls within seconds. Crafty little fuckers will never give you consistency or peace. Be ready for action soon as your feet hit dirt. Once the shooting starts, it's real simple. See an ostrich, shoot it. Stab if they get too close or you run out of bullets. Rinse and repeat till they retreat or your shift ends. If those ostriches ain't dead by the end of the day, the night shift will tap you out. Usually the latter. You kill until you clock out or you're dead. Simple shit. What's not so simple is at some point, Hyena Man is going to take his pants off and start cackling like the devil. It's not a sex thing, unlike those ostrich fuckers in the night shift. It's a PTSD thing and a mutate thing. Anyway, Hyena Man's going to take his pants off and go apeshit with his fists. You're going to let him do his thing. Hyena Man's been beating ostriches to death with his bare hands for 7 years with almost no injuries and a higher kill count than God. Just mind your damn business and keep your eye on your own. A wandering eye is going to get you killed. Your other coworkers ain't going to take their pants off, but they're plenty colorful too. Ain't going to tell you about them, though. More than likely, they'll be dead before you get a backstory out of them. Or you'll be too dead to hear it. The only certainty in this fuck of a job on this hell fuck of an earth is that the Holy War is a meat grinder for cowboys and Hyena Man will never die. The ostriches will fuck the violet sun out of the sky before any of us get a lukewarm pint of goddamn dignity. But ain't that the bitch of it? You will know them. And you will love them. The other ranch hands. You will love them so fucking fierce in the shared indignity of it all. Ostriches to the left, ostrich fuckers to the right, stuck in the middle with the bottom feeders and upper management. Out here in the killing pastures on the muddy border of wage labor and holy war, all you got is them. The boys, the scorched earth, and the Sunday fucking service. Amen, and all that. You adjust. Soon you'll stop coming home at the end of the day. No home to go back to. No one who could ever get it but the boys. Nothing and nowhere and no one at all but you and y'all at the never-ending end of the fucking world. You and the other high rollers of the Holy War congregating at the bottomless pulpit of a seedy dive bar to black out on petrol shots and crack rock cola, playing cards and Russian roulette to pass the time. Rolling blackouts of the nervous system to keep us safe from neuroelectric auto-immolation. It's a fuck ugly, evil way to go. Worse than getting your brainstem fucked right off your spine by an ostrich. At least getting fucked to death, you've got the dignity of knowing the end is nigh and that you died for something. Anything. There's no fucking dignity in spontaneous heat death. No fucking dignity in being burned out of space-time itself. Nothing left of you but your neuroelectric ghost imprinted in hellfire upon the fabric of the world. Watching someone die like this breaks you. Watching your friend die like this, utterly helpless to save them, breaks you beyond salvation. Ain't no holy war to fix that. And yet you go on. You adjust. What other choice is there? There ain't no sane reason to work for the Apostle Ranch. The pay is a pittance. The work is traumatic, and the working conditions are depraved. Ain't even healthcare. But if you're looking to devote yourself to a holy war, the Apostle Ranch is always hiring converts. That's the gospel orientation I gave the last Green Ranch hand that took the job. His name was Pigeon. He heard me, but he did not heed me. On his second day, he panicked. He ran. He ran straight into the barbed wire fence at the edge of the pasture. Got tangled up in the wire like a frightened horse in a thunderstorm. It's fucking horrific. Blood spurting from deep lacerations throbbing with rust. Ribbons of flesh and muscle dangling like tattered prayer cloth. The fence-sitting boys of St. Peter tranquilized him before he could accidentally kill himself on the fence. They cut Pigeon loose and took him away. We went back to work. No use dwelling. No time to, what with the ostriches at our necks, anyway. Nothing we could do to help him, anyway. We adjusted. Just another day of the holy war of the rest of our lives. Next morning, we clocked into the killing pasture to find him crucified. His guts were being pecked out by baby ostriches. A get-well-soon balloon was tied around his neck like a noose. Besides the scarecrow made of pigeon was a stone pillar etched with a commandment. Abandon all hope ye who desert the holy war, signed the foreman of the Inquisition. So here's the thing, you scab motherfucker. This is the one fucking warning you get. If you cross this picket line, there ain't no good end for you. The ostriches, the immolation, or the bosses will fuck you dead. Scabs get picked off the skin when their use is up, son. You've got yourself a choice. Make it. Ours is a holy strike by Russian roulette. A potentially loaded chamber will go off against our skulls every hour our demands aren't met. We are the apostates, and we will kill ourselves for an ounce of goddamn fucking dignity if we have to. This is an act of worship. It has to be.